state of gaming on Facebook now?
Our socks on, so it must be going well if you haven't had these. No, games going well. It's best way to look at Facebook games. People sometimes look at it too narrowly. So the way we look at it internally is anything we do to work with developers to drive their business. So there's the traditional business of Flash, increasingly Unity games on Canvas. There's the ads business on desktop, both for Canvas and off of Canvas. There's our mobile ads business, of which games is an important part. And then there's our new mobile publishing business, which is in its pilot phase. And then there's our organic channels we just use to integrate with games. So across the board, games is going well. How do we drive more users, more value for developers using the Facebook platform? Whether it's on desktop, mobile, tablet, other aspects, it changes for us depending on which OS or which platform we're on. But it's all about integrate with Facebook, drive more value, whether it's on acquisition or now re-engagement as well.
You mentioned that people view it narrowly. Some people have the impression that Facebook gaming has been in a state of decline because Zynga has risen and fallen, I guess. So what has happened just on that front?
So we have earnings in about 4 hours, so there's somewhat limited to what I can say. But in general, if you look at Q1 and Q2, in our traditional desktop business, we had record revenue. And we continue to look to grow that business. If you look at our mobile ads business and what we do in mobile, that has, if you talk to any developer here, been a strong performer for us. So what we see in the desktop business is a changing of the guard to a certain extent. King clearly has risen quite a bit, and there's a bunch of new developers. And I spend the last 30 days or coming up, my team's been in Shenzhen, Chengdu, Tel Aviv last week, Moscow in 3 weeks, London, we had a big meeting this morning. So we are an international business. The amount of international developers creating awesome games is really what's the most interesting part about this. How standings go or who's the leader, as does in the traditional video game business, change from year to year, generation to generation. We look at overall how do we grow the business.
There's a different mix too, like I guess there's more mid-core companies that are coming.
There are, every year I'm told that you are the platform of X. So 3 years ago we were the platform of farming and city games. And then we were the platform of casino games, and then we were the platform of casual games, and now we're the platform of mid-core games. We're actually all of the above. We certainly have worked hard to get the breadth possible so that if you're looking for a game on Facebook, you should be able to find that type of game. But if you think about mid-core, especially with the rise of Unity, and we spend a lot of time with our partnership with Unity, to make sure you can make really deep immersive games on Canvas, and that you can make them easily cross-platform. So mid-core tends to be up there. And there's one this morning, I literally just this morning, Battlefront Heroes came out from Gosys, which is a Chinese ex-Playfish team. Awesome game, mid-core game. Literally didn't know about it until I saw it this morning. So we continue to see those types of games appearing. But I'd say it's a breadth. Hidden object games. And there's I've been looking for a horror game in the hidden object genre, a very obvious move. I haven't seen it yet. And so we've got Raven Hill Asylum from a Russian developer. That's pretty cool. So it's really, mid-core is certainly an area that's expanding quickly, but it's really about breadth at the end of the day. If you look at our top 10 games, it's a mixture of casino, casual, simulation, making farming, and then some strategy or RTS style games. And that's really what matters for us.
So a lot of companies have moved to mobile. What's the argument for having them stay with Facebook as they move to mobile?
Yeah, again, stay with Facebook means use the Facebook platform to drive value for you on whatever platform you're on. So it doesn't mean stay with Canvas. It means use Facebook for your login, your social graph, your acquisition, your engagement. What we see now is a couple trends. One, we see mobile-only companies starting to come back to Canvas. So look at Jurassic Park Builder from Lydia. As they start to see benefits from what we see in the data is when you allow your best players to make the game available across all platforms, they play more. And it sounds funny, they don't just play on mobile. They play on whatever device is in front of them. And as long as we can make it as easy as possible for you to make a cross-platform game, partially it's Unity, partially it's some other things we're working on, that it becomes a no-brainer that you should be making a Canvas game as well, for a couple reasons. And King has obviously done this brilliantly with Candy Crush and others, is one, you want to launch on desktop first because you can iterate much faster. There's no submission process. It's all server-side. You can change your model, especially on a new game. You're trying to figure out how your economic model works, what doesn't work. Second is CPIs, which is how we still measure those.
King basically gets the, say, customer feedback really, they work it into the design, they get it working right, monetize it right, then they move it over.
Correct. And the second thing is cost per acquisition is lower on desktop than it is on mobile. So you can get to a critical mass. And then as soon as you take it to mobile, which King does generally 3+ months after launch on desktop, you have a bunch of users. We saw this with Dragon City, we saw this with Jewel Blitz, we saw this with Solitaire Blitz. You hit mobile, and a bunch of those users automatically start downloading the game because they see the messages in the Facebook feed, or friends tell them about it, and the thing starts to move up quickly, and that's with no marketing. Then at that point, you've got a multi-platform game, and we're playing it across all of the channels. The Facebook messaging APIs work across all the channels, and it ends up being a higher value add for the developer. It's hard. Certain types of games are harder to program, so they're cross-platform. If you want to play offline, is it different play times, more frequent play times on a phone versus a tablet versus desktop? But if you look at our top games now by revenue, 7 of the 10 are cross-platform, and I think in 2014, almost all games will be launched cross-platform. It just doesn't make any sense to do it another way.
Have you had to deal with anything that makes that transition difficult? Because Facebook is operating within the confines of another platform's rules.
Yeah, one, we run a platform, so we have to appreciate the ability of the platform to have rules. So we're fine with that. Generally, on mobile, we link to and try and drive value to the iOS and Google Play stores. So as long as we're doing that and helping people find games they want to find, it's generally worked pretty well. It's Google and Apple, we spend a lot of time with them. They bring immense value to the ecosystem with credentials, devices, the whole ecosystem. And so for our part in that ecosystem is helping drive a social graph, drive acquisition, drive retention. And that's really where we're focused as a company.
So what's the sort of roadmap as it will sort of affect game developers?
Roadmap is one, as we head into 2014, one, make it as easy as possible to do cross-platform. It should be, again, a no-brainer to launch desktop, iOS, and Android. That's mostly with our Unity SDK, which is now went gold into the Unity Asset Store. But there are other ways we're looking at it and making sure messaging works cross-platform. We have Parse now, which we acquired, which is a back-end hosting solution for mobile to make it as easy as possible to produce games using the Facebook overall ecosystem. Second is how we improve discovery. We'll hear it all day long today and throughout the year. Discovery. With that many apps out there, whether it's an improved app center on our side, other ways to produce units, whether they're paid or viral, that allow your game to find its audience is really the key thing to look at. And then 3, we're spending a lot of time on mobile and tablets, trying to figure out how we can add value there to make sure that you've got a really robust system that is, again, as fun on a tablet, mobile, or on a PC as it is on any of those devices.
How much of a threat are some of the new mobile messaging services, especially in Asia, like say Kakao or Line, WeChat?
Yeah, I think what we found is if you have a large audience, especially mobile, the best way to monetize it is to somehow get them to install a game. We've seen this from the value that's driven through mobile ecosystems right now is primarily games, particularly in Asia. So we obviously have a very large audience across both mobile and desktop, so we spend a lot of time focused on this. We certainly see Kakao Online and others doing this. I think in general it'll come down to, do you have a great social graph? Are you able to control spam? And certainly we went through that type of issue 2 or 3 years ago with our own newsfeed. And I think we'll see it just continue to evolve. But the good news for everybody is there are more ways to get your app found. The bad news is there are a lot of apps and it's pretty expensive right now. And so it really comes down to what's your audience and what's your LTV. And it just can't all be about, as John said, it can't all be about card games and Clash of Clans inspired games. We need a whole breadth of games. And I think we'll see us and others really help drive that ecosystem so that everybody can find the games they want to play.
Line seems to have made an interesting sort of different choice about how they do their games, where they're really heavily curated, and there's something like 32 games online. But some of these are also showing up in the top 10 Google Play games on a worldwide basis, right? That's a very different sort of approach. Have you guys thought about curation?
Yeah, we run an open platform. It's kind of fundamental to the vision of the company is to allow anybody to create games they want to. And then we have algorithms that hopefully start to point the correct games to the people who are interested in them. Quality is an eye of the beholder. And so I may not think Britney Spears is the best singer in the world, but a lot of people seem to. So it's not so much up to the curation side. We can do this much of it algorithmically, some of it editorially, to figure out the right way to surface games. And that's really where we spent the last year. If you lived through it 2 or 3 years ago when it feels like everybody was getting a farming request at all times, we're trying to not do that so much anymore. So we're really trying to make sure we've got targeted games to the right users. That's really hard. With Cacao, I had to turn off Cacao because my phone was doing nothing but vibrating all day long. And so these are normal things platforms go through, whether it's a heavy curation method, which tends to then broaden out. But certainly in Japan and Korea, parts of China, those types of initiatives have done really well. We've yet to see them do well globally, but I think 2004 will be really interesting for that.
So do you actually foresee global games that work in Asia, the US, and Europe?
We certainly see them. Again, most of my team is outside the US now, between Asia and Europe, seeing some of the great developers around the world. And so it's hard to make truly global games. We can make games that are successful globally, but are certainly much stronger in parts of the world. War Tune is a good example. So War Tune is the #1 game on Tencent most of the time. And unlike most Chinese broad games, which are based on Three Kingdoms, have you ever tried to read Three Kingdoms, the book? It's the seminal book of China. It's 1,200 pages and very difficult. Read and watch the miniseries is my recommendation. But it's the foundation for most games. What they did with War Tune was they took a classic Three Kingdoms style game, great RPG, and yet did it with dwarves and elves, which is a much more global style graphic and overall background. And it's done incredibly well. Does really well on us. Does well on
a lot of those ebony style sexy ads, as I remember too.
There's a little bit of that going on. We see that occasionally. But what we see is when you find global mechanics or global themes, dwarves and elves appear to be one of those. Then you see games that can be truly global. And I think what we'll see, Puzzle Dragons, Candy Crush is going to be a global hit. So it's hard. It's really, really hard. If you look at the big Nintendo hits in the US, Nintendo's a brilliant game developer. It's 2 Italian plumbers. So it's definitely not a classic Japanese style game. But the Asian market is so large and growing so quickly between Korea, Japan, and China that we certainly all have to look at what are the best ways to address those markets as they continue to grow both mobile and desktop.
So our theme here is the Battle Royal, where sort of the barriers are down and everybody's kind of in a free-for-all. Does it feel like that is the case, that we're in this great sort of all-out platform war, et cetera?
So I've been in games about 20 years, back to the Sega Dreamcast days. And so we've seen a lot of platforms come and go. I think the theme I tend to look at, which is making this upcoming period pretty difficult for developers, is traditionally you had a platform run for about 7 years, and then it went away, and chaos reigned, and then a new platform came along. What we had in the last 5 or 6 years was really 3 consecutive platforms that all reached scale very quickly. We had Facebook Desktop, we had iOS, and then we had Google or Android. And then to a certain extent, tablet you could see as a superset or a subset. Those were big platforms that reached scale, that enabled lots of people, especially smaller developers, to do quite well by jumping to the next platform quickly before it got too crowded. It's not clear, although Kenny certainly feels very strongly about what they say, it's not clear yet that the next platform is there, at least at scale. And so the competition grows in the existing platforms as we see a million apps and costs of both development and marketing acquisition going up. And so this is where it's going to be a really interesting 2014, where it's not clear which platform, if you get squeezed out of this one, which platform you jump to. So we're spending a lot more time in the indie community. We hired AJ Glasser, the former journalist in this, who's been awesome since she joined us, and is really reaching out heavily to gaming communities to make sure we're helping to surface those types of games, because it's going to get very crowded on all platforms. And we need to make sure that Facebook is there helping drive, again, successful games from all developers, not just big ones.
You also just began this mobile publishing business with Facebook published games.
We did. As part of that theme that I just went through, but we're seeing a set of games from just an incredible set of developers that are going to have trouble finding an audience because the cost of marketing and acquisition is so high. So if you look at Shipwreck from Kiwi and Samurai Siege from SpaceX, which are two of the games we're publishing now, they're great games with good retention and nice revenue per user, but it's an expensive game everybody's playing it. So we piloted the publishing program. It's still nascent, it's still very early, trying to figure out that right balance between how we promote games, how we keep an open platform for everybody else who wants to buy ads, but also how we find a way for smaller developers to find an audience. And the current time frame is going to get very difficult because of the upfront costs of acquiring users, and we need to be there to help small developers.
Okay, do we have any questions from the audience?
Wow.
On that front, did anybody sort of who's an existing publisher express any concern that Facebook might be competing?
Absolutely. And we went out to our top publishers, discussed it with them. And again, our point of view on this one is, if you're a big company with a lot of cash on the balance sheet and a big user acquisition team, you should buy ads. You're good at it, you know what you're doing, there's lots of options for that, whether it's us or others. As a smaller company without those options, either you don't have a big user acquisition team or the balance sheet to do so, we need to find ways, not just us, but the community needs to find ways to find promising games and audience. Doesn't mean everybody succeeds. We've all been through this before. I've certainly had my share of failed games that I've made. But it does mean that we need to find, in this metaphor, a publishing style approach that allows small companies to have their games played.
Question?
Hey, Sean. Excuse me. Hey, Sean, given how competitive it now is with mobile, and you see traffic of games moving to mobile and getting higher LTVs on mobile, would Facebook consider dropping its revenue share to make Facebook a more attractive platform than iOS or Android?
No. One is, what we found is in Q1 and Q2, we had record revenue on campus. So we continue to grow the business, we continue to find ways to grow it. We think that we add value, and there's nothing magical about a 30% outside of the fact that, honestly, that's what retailer gets paid for delivering a customer in general for having a platform. If you look at GameStop or you look at Apple, Google, or us. But in general, we feel it's the right balance of value, which is we have 1.2 billion users, and this is the way to reach them. But again, we understand that people are going to develop on mobile, and mobile has certain great characteristics, like it's growing like crazy. And some characteristics which are tough, which there are 1 million apps plus, and CPIs are extremely expensive. So what we find from our better developers is that the multi-platform approach really works for you, especially with Unity and other ways that make it easier to not have two completely separate development teams. And so far we've seen some great new developers come out in the last 6 months and be successful on the platform. And Game Insight, which is a big Russian company, was mobile only for the last 2 years and has released something like 8 games on Canvas, all multi-platform in the last 6 months. And they're successful. And so we see this still being a really attractive platform, but absolutely, you should be developing multi-platform games.
Very good. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you.